In a dimly lit room, a man handcuffed to a black briefcase slides it on the table and opens it. Inside this briefcase are tools and information with pre-planned options, communication devices, and authentication codes. He hands the case to the man next to him, the President of the United States. He has just ordered a nuclear strike using something called the nuclear football. The nuclear football is also known as the Presidential Emergency Satchel, and it is a briefcase handcuffed to his close assistant who is near the President at all times. With the codes inputted and the order issued, a missile flies across the globe with absolute fury, decimating its target, whoever so is unfortunate enough to be at the receiving end. Incredible devastation and destruction will assuredly follow. But what happens next? Welcome to Future Scout. Today, we're discussing what would happen if a world leader used the nuclear option. Let's explore. Let's first talk about the world's nuclear stockpile. As of 2023, there are roughly 12,500 nuclear weapons in the world. Further dissecting this number shows that Russia and the United States have the largest stockpile, with over 5,000 nuclear weapons each, more than enough to cause a global extinction event. China comes in a distant third with 400 nuclear weapons, and France, the UK, Pakistan, and India also possess over 100 nuclear weapons each. This means that from a pure numbers point of view, the countries most likely to engage in nuclear war are the ones with the most missiles, namely the US or Russia, though rogue actors like North Korea may also be wildcards with their nuclear stockpiles. What happens though if one of these powers sets off a nuclear weapon? First, let's assume in our scenario that the United States is firing a nuclear weapon in retaliation to another country firing a nuke that was successfully shot down without incident. The US has learned that this country was targeting a large metropolitan population such as New York or Los Angeles. The US feels in this scenario that it needs to retaliate in kind before another missile is potentially launched to ensure the strike ends. Let's assume this country is not in any strategic treaties or alliances with or against the United States and has some large metropolitan areas, but they're spread out with lots of rural in between. First, the US has several options. Do they launch their nuclear weapon from an Ohio-class submarine? The US has 14 Ohio-class submarines that are all stealth-equipped and capable of deploying Trident II D5 missiles, which are part of the Navy's strategic nuclear deterrent. If an Ohio-class submarine isn't the desired launch platform, the US can use a cruise missile to deliver a nuclear payload via mobile launches on the ground and from naval ships. However a bomb would be delivered, the impact would be the same. The immediate after effects would be a blinding light 800 to 900 times brighter than a desert sun at the peak of the afternoon. Once this bomb hits, the unbelievable heat and energy from the fireball quickly ascends into the atmosphere, which creates an explosive mushroom cloud in its wake. Smoke and debris form a visible column that will be the stock of this mushroom signature. An enormous shockwave extends out, depending on how large the payload of the bomb would be. This would be a shockwave that would absolutely destroy and vaporize everything within a set radius of the explosion. Following the immediate vaporization, the explosive wave of compressed air would level buildings, blow away entire urban environments, and cause untold destruction. And here we'll draw a distinction. There are in fact two types of nuclear weapons, fission and fusion. Fission splits the atomic nuclei and are highly radioactive, causing radioactive contamination through nuclear fallout. Fusion weapons are considered thermonuclear bombs. These compress and heat atomic fusion fuel rather than splitting an atomic nucleus. And this leads to less radioactive fallout. In fact, most modern bombs are thermonuclear fusion weapons. Since the US would likely be using a thermonuclear bomb, we can assume if it is detonated above ground prior to this explosion, the fallout would not be radioactive. However, once this urban area was laid to ruin, the lives of everyone around the perimeter of the blast would be ruined. Eardrums would be blown out, people would be blind from having looked toward the explosion, shadows would be burned into the ground, and the shockwave itself would undoubtedly cause massive bodily harm. Assuming this happened, there would be an immediate humanitarian crisis. With the decimation of infrastructure from the blast, power and water would be unusable, and the debris would prevent any meaningful coordination from happening. While it's likely that global humanitarian aid would be offered to a country's civilians after this, it would not be easy to coordinate if the United States placed further sanctions on the country in question. This would mean an embargo on the country to prevent free trade. The US military, accompanied by NATO, the UN forces, would likely invade the country and take control of it, thus ensuring that leadership, had they escaped the consequences of the blast, would be unable to attempt this again. One would hope that if a situation like this ever did play out, that the innocent civilians would be treated with dignity and respect. These people would all have had their worlds completely ruined and would be in dire need of economic and nutritional stability, medical and humanitarian aid, as well as a path to reintegrate into a global society following this nuclear attack. Even if this was the only exchange, the first missile being shot down and the second nuclear weapon detonation on this hypothetical country, then the economic fallout would be extreme. Undoubtedly, the stock markets would face enormous liquidation, and trade would likely come grinding to a halt due to the fear of another strike happening from other countries. Suddenly, trading food with a frenemy would be undesirable. A staple resource would become more precious and grant more bargaining power. Countries would turn against each other until guaranteed cooperation and assurance prevailed, if it even could. The global civilian populace would be on edge, having never experienced nuclear war or the use of weapons on civilians since World War II. This might inspire many to begin wreaking havoc in society due to a fear that a re-emergence of nuclear war would mean that society itself would be on the brink of ruin. Violence would increase, social sentiments would lower considerably, and law enforcement and the National Guard would have to be deployed extensively to maintain peace due to the frenzy that would follow. Heightened international tensions might inspire other countries to launch singular nuclear strikes against their adversaries, fearing that now that the nuclear Pandora's box had been opened, there is no shutting it. The United Nations would likely have to make an emergency summit, forcing a treaty signed by all participants to refrain from further nuclear actions or retaliations. The potential for escalation would be horrifying, filling the news cycle endlessly until years of uneventful skies had passed and no further bombs had gone off. The US would likely face economic sanctions from a number of countries who had voiced disapproval of the retaliatory method, though no one can say for certain that they would not have done the same thing had they shot down a preemptive nuclear warhead aiming for their soil. This would destabilize economies on a regional and global scale and cause a drastic shift in the business landscape across virtually all industries and sectors. In order to prevent additional strikes, open communication between world leaders would be critical to de-escalate any situation and reassure their own citizens and partners that no further bombs would be dropped. The future can sometimes feel very bleak when thinking that we, as a society, have held the power to destroy ourselves many times over, ever since the Second World War. We are constantly witnessing skirmishes, conflicts, and wars break out across the globe. The Israel-Palestine conflict and Russia-Ukraine conflicts are prime examples of this. In the best-case scenario, nuclear weapons will never be used, and hopefully the world continues reducing rather than increasing the numbers of weapons in existence. We must continue to petition our governments to never use nuclear force and to continue to reduce stockpiles across the globe as a whole. To be perfectly clear, no one on this earth deserves to experience nuclear war, and hopefully no one ever will. Thank you for watching Future Scout. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and we will see you next time.